Hey, this is Padmanabhan. I've been listening to Jiddu Krishnamurthy, the great religious philosopher, for more than 45 years. What Krishnamurthy talked about brought enormous input to the mankind. I would say they are revolutionary in nature. I had the opportunity to attend to his public talks in Chennai, Madras at the time, from 1977 to February, rather 1986. Jiddu Krishnamurthy passed away in February 1986. Krishnamurthy, in his lifetime, had talked to various scientists, biologists, zoologists, computer specialists, religious scholars, and various other specialists regarding, human and his problems, and how to, work on those things. Are all this being discussed by Krishnamurthy? They are available as videos. Many of them are available as videos in YouTube. One can view them. Um, what Krishnamurthy discussed with Dr. David Bohm is worth mentioning over here. I had gone into various of its discussions, which happened in various decades, right from 60s, 70s, 1980s, and all. Okay, the core of Jiddu Krishnamurthy's teaching uh, uh, is that thought is a divisive force and it divides man and mankind. Uh, he said, like, while thought brought technical supremacy, uh, it brought also havoc uh, to the mankind by way of wars and other human killings, and all. Uh, it brought serious suffering to the mankind. He said that there's a different way of living in which there's no place for thought. Um, Taking a cue from this statement of Jiddu Krishnamurthy, I drawn a presentation to give a different perspective to this statement and much of the core of his teachings. With this note, I want to share with you a presentation, and I'll take you to to the same. Okay, 1 minute. Right. Uh, what I've depicted over here is that the various incidents that happen in our lifetime are all, on a day-to-day basis, are sensed by our senses, and then they are brought as information to the brain, right? The brain receives them and stores it in the memory cells, and it also reacts as and when necessary. Well, I'm not a brain specialist nor a neuroscientist. This is something we all know. What we feel on a day-to-day basis is what I have stated. Based on it only, I have stated over here. So yeah, so everyone can feel the same. That's what I wanted to say. Right now, what I have depicted here is that there seems to be, I said, there seems to be, uh, for explanation purposes, I've drawn that. There seems to be something as a pure brain process, and there is another one is called as a thought tool based process. The thought tool, thinking tool, is something, the brain. It's a child of the brain itself, if I may say. It is invoked by the brain, and it does its thinking process to that, right? And there is also, as I said, there are two processes. One, the pure brain process, which directly acts on the memory cells, and the brain reacts on that. And another is the brain reacts through the thought tool process. That rather, it invokes the thought tool, and the various reactions or actions happen through that, right? I'll go to the next slide. Um, what happens is that, suppose when you invoke through the thought tool, uh, I have depicted here something called a thought database, right? You can imagine that this is an abstract of what is stored in the memory cells, right? And the thought tool acts through the thought database. Um, uh, uh, the word database suggests that it's at the end of the day, um, it's something created by our own brain, based on the incidents that are happening. Okay, so that is an intention of the word database over here. You may take it. When it goes through the thought database, there are at least I can say three aspects I may have to explain over here. One is that it's limited, right? Because it's something what it has stored. From that only it reacts. Okay, we will further explain on that. Second is that there seems to be a profile of the self is behind. Now we all know the ego process, or the selfish or the self actions that are there, typically there, and that is what I call as a self or a profile in all this. Whenever the thought tool is invoked, that self also acts. A profile always act. And the third one is the impact of the human consciousness. If I have to quote Krishnamurthy, he says there is only one consciousness, which is the common one, shared by the human, rather mankind. And that human consciousness also has an impact whenever the thought tool is invoked. Just coming back to on the and further note on the profile, this it represents the self engine. Uh, the self engine is always active, right? And the profile is, if I have to say, is always active, and it brings forth various likes, dislikes, conclusions, our own, bias or prejudices based on our hurts and other things. Always, the whole thought engine will work towards gratifying itself, and that's called self gratification. um, it's like the gravitational pull which acts on the earth or any celestial object. The self center pulls the thought process to suit to its gratification needs, and so the rationality will be lost. This is what, the impact of the profile, right? So this is one thing we can also feel. This one I've kind of expanded that. We can discuss much more on this thing. It's a very important thing. One has to say, whenever the thinking process acts, this profile is acting. Now one can also imagine, today in various technology apps, you call technical applications or apps, they also store a profile of yours. So that helps while you navigate through the application. Like you take a browser, simple browser itself, internet browser, it also stores your profile, and it shows your, likes, dislikes based on it. Like, YouTube, you go through that apps, it brings whatever you already liked or disliked, or I mean, like, whatever your preferences, it brings those YouTubes. Similarly, the internet settings, the browser settings helps you to navigate through the browser based on your likes or other preferences that you have set. So that is the way any application, technical application, is as acting. You can imagine the similar way based on a profile, or our thinking process itself, the thought tool process acts and brings, I would say, limitations in our whole perceiving and actions coming out of that. So that's what a simple way to, we can discuss furthermore on this profile, but it is a very important thing one has to under. It's a very active and live one, and if I may say, a destructive one all the same, right? We'll further discuss on this, right? The other thing is that the human consciousness is a common one. Uh, it's an interesting. The human consciousness is not just one. It's kind of a built up over a million years of human existence, and it's like running stream, and the human thinking process is always in touch with that. The human consciousness, if I have to say, that it has, um, combination of everything that has happened in the history of man, his whole way of a brutal way of acting, his selfish way of working, uh, comparison, envy, greed, all those a typical I human negative side, even the positive side, is all bundled in this consciousness, in the common consciousness, and that actually always act whenever the thinking process is acting, right? So uh, so whenever the thinking process is happening, so a profile is acting, right? The individual's preferences, the likes, dislikes, and other conclusions, prejudices, and or the common negative aspects, like envy, greed, whatever. All these things coming from the human consciousness act on it, pulls down the whole thinking process, it limits it, and what otherwise an infinite capacity of the brain is limited by the thinking process. So that's an important thing to be noted. So, we are saying there is a beautiful pure brain process, and there is something called thought tool process. This is limited. This is the most powerful one, the brain process, a pure brain process, whereas this is limited, and for various reasons we just now explained, right? So just to so having said that, we're also saying that directly acts when the brain process acts, pure brain process acts, it directly accesses the memory cells, it knows how to handle the data, and there is no ego involved, and the data access, there is no limitation in it. The data per se will be technically limited, but then there, since the ego is not there, it doesn't affect the rationality is not affected. The pure brain process works, brings about the infinite energy. So it is being said that we need to remove these to the thought tool process, or rather, that's what this diagram says. We need, if this is removed, the pure brain process only removes, right? And so that's what the intention to about this diagram. Okay, before that, now I just want to say, we generally, the brain is acting. This is something, although I have defined, one can feel that there are two processes, brain process and thinking based processes. Okay, now it is, these two processes are always intertwined for millions of years. The brain is used, or rather conditioned, if I may say, to use the thinking process, the thought tool process, and this so conditioned, it is so intertwined, if I may say, we do not know whether it's a pure brain process or a thinking process. Like, for example, suppose you see a beautiful car or a beautiful house. You might, on the first, or the sunset itself, or a beautiful sunset, or a nature, the first impression, if there's a joy in seeing that, but the next minute itself, there'll be a thinking process. What it means, I possess it, I do that, I possess the house, or I want to enjoy the sunset daily, or sunrise daily, like that. That is, one can say, is an action of the thinking process, while the first action is a pure brain process. Immediately the thought thread happens, and then it brings about the various other things, what it means, this profile, the self acts, and it brings about how it means, what it means, if it can possess it, like that. The thought thread is also invoked along with the pure brain process, and it is always, much of the times, one can say, always that is so intertwined. Of course, we will discuss there is some way we can live without this thought tool process. So it's so intertwined, we don't know whether it's a thinking process or the pure brain process, right? So yeah, how to know that, how to know where that the thought tool is used? The indicators are clear, like there seems to be a pleasure. Now when you see the sunrise or sunset or any natural thing, the first sight is the beauty of it. The immediately you can see, want to possess it or something, or the pleasure, you want to continue the joy to pleasure and continue with that. Then comes the thinking process. You can say, you can think that it has got, you can understand it has got set in. So those are the indicators, the pleasure. And immediately some kind of a comparison might come. Oh, the other has done, he is able to enjoy, or he's having a bungalow, or he is having a car, or he's having a nice cloth, or something like that. Such kind of comparison and all comes, and brings further pain, and because of it the fear comes, anxiety comes, and so on. These are some minimum indications I've written here. One can feel that there are many indications are there by which we can know that the thought tool has been invoked, and because of it, the whole limitations come into play. Right now, if, as I said before, one has to, the best way is to have only the pure brain process. And once having become aware that I've used the thinking process, one may feel like how to stop it. That's what I've indicated over here through a red spot here. Right now, how to remove that? Don't do action, don't do any effort to remove that. Any effort will be again another thinking process, right? So all that one has to do is to be completely aware that you are invoked the thinking process, and because of it, all this movement of the thought process, if I can say, the pleasure, pain, anxiety, everything, fear, all these things come into play. Right now, one of the techniques, if I may say, to avoid this is to be completely aware that there is a thought tool process has been invoked. I'm just saying it's a thoughtful process, not just the content of it. I'm not getting into it. We have to be aware that these processes are there. This process has been invoked. And so the limitations are that. That's all. Don't get into a particular content like, oh, I have a house, or I have things, I have, I'm not paid this salary, or this, I'm not earning this much, or like that. If you begin to get into the content, then you're finished. Then you are inside the database. Whereas if you are aware as a process, it seems to be there, the thought tool process have been invoked, then the brain itself helps you to stop that. I'll tell you how it is. I give an analogy you have written over here, wherein today, you all know that we don't touch the fire, right? We know that it is hot and you don't touch. Like in a pan, if it is hot, you don't touch the, through the hand, you don't touch the flame or the fire, because not that we think and not touch it. It is something, the brain itself is aware that it is such a um, negative force, such an that it affects its very survival. Then, if such is the kind of insight is having, the brain doesn't allow you to touch the pan or the fire. Like that, if the insight is there, is deeply felt that that this thought tool has been invoked. Again, not don't go into the content of the thought, like this particular joy, a particular kind of pleasure, like that. You don't go into that particular content. You just be aware that there is a thinking process has been started. That's, and be aware and stop at that. If you begin to get into the content, as I said, there will be further reactions. You'll be justifying. You are caught inside the thought database. One action goes into another action, like that. There is no. It's a cycle. It doesn't allow you to get out of that. On the other hand, if you are aware that there is a thinking process has started, like a fire is there, it is there, and it is limited, it is divisive. It, however much you are objective, you will not be objective. You will be irrational whenever the thinking process is on. That kind of insight, if I may say, is there, or rather, one can feel that. Then the brain itself stop the thinking process. One need not battle at all. All that one has to get to the feel of that the thought process has started. Remember, I'm not getting into the content. Um, uh, like an example, now we've been told that don't pursue money, don't pursue, after money and all, as a general moral, policy has been given in the society. But again, it is a content. Money, pursue more. Like, on the other hand, if they are touch that you are touching the thinking process, which is what brings these things, then the brain can stop. If you get into the money, then if you get into particular content, namely here this example I said, which is what the typical example given in the society, don't pursue out of the money. Money cannot give you happiness. This does not help. We have been telling this, quoting this statement, but what is thing is that does not help man to stop pursuing that. Not only money, many pleasures and all that one has to with that. Actually, if you go beyond, we seek money. The thinking process, I said, the gratification actually seeks security. It feels money brings security. Like that, if you go into deeper into the individual content of the thinking process, here assuming this example, the pursuing the acquiring of money and all, what happens is that the brain, the mind, the thinking process tells that there is a security. As I said, the thinking process always seeks a place where it gets gratified. If you go one step behind, when the profile, we said it's a gratification of itself. The gratification in seeking money or any pleasure, it is there. That's why it goes from one, because the brain or the thought process always seeks security in a thing where there is no security at all. So it hops from one pleasure to another pleasure, one seeking to another seeking, like that it goes. That's how it happens, right? So, so, uh, what we are saying over here is that, so it is having understood that the thinking process, the very thinking process has to be stopped. That input, having seen the limitation of the thinking process, and without getting into the content, the thinking process, that the brain itself helps us to stop the thinking process, like it doesn't allow us to touch the fire. That is what I said as a conclusion over here. So the only way of living is the direct perception by the brain without using the thought tool. There'll be no ego in action, pure brain in action, which will bring infinite capacity of the brain into play. It's a very important. As I said, the pure brain process has got an infinite capacity, whereas the thinking tool process limits it because of the profile self as well as the human consciousness coming into the play. So this is what I feel like is a important but very simple understanding, helps us in a day-to-day living. We can live in a different way. Now, uh, Krishnamurthy has talked over 60 years or more on various topics. I feel like um, we can map much of his talks to this particular thinking aspect, which I presented over here. So I would say we can map many topics, what Krishnamurthy has said, like freedom from the known, very important topic, stepping out of the consciousness. These are all, you're not different from the world. These are all unique statements from Krishnamurthy. We can map to this, this diagram. What I intend to do this thing for now, I would stop with this presentation as a first step. I'll intend to issue more videos like this, wherein I will cover individual topics, so that now we are able to easily bring what Krishnamurthy said onto this, and so that we can if I may say, easily come out of that thinking process, and have without conflict we can live. Okay, so with that note, I would conclude this. You can talk to me. You can send out a mail. Okay, we can get connected. I can discuss further on this. So I appreciate your comments, and we can discuss further. And also I would also release a few more videos on this. Okay, thanks for listening and your comments. Okay, thank you.